The notification chime from my phone cut through the kitchen silence like a blade through warm butter. Cloud sync complete. I paused, my hands sticky with turkey brine, and stared at the screen. 23 new photos uploaded from Lumi's device, and my wife was upstairs, supposedly organizing guest rooms for tomorrow's Thanksgiving feast. The cranberry sauce gleamed like rubies in the white ceramic bowl beside me, catching the afternoon light streaming through our kitchen windows. Everything looked perfect, just like Lumi always insisted it should be. I wiped my hands on the dish towel and picked up the phone. The photos were from last weekend's girls' trip to the wine country. Lumi with her college friends, all smiles and raised glasses. Normal enough, until I scrolled to the last few images. There he was, Hayes Rellan, my wife's supposed ex-boyfriend, who she always claimed was like a brother to her now. The man I'd invited to tomorrow's Thanksgiving dinner because family should be together for the holidays. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m. The location data pinged from the Napa Valley Resort. Room 237. Hayes wasn't supposed to be on that girl's trip. I set the phone down with deliberate care, the way I'd learned to handle evidence during my 12 years with Army Criminal Investigation Division. Before Lumi knew me as Brooks Carvin, mild-mannered IT consultant, I'd specialized in digital forensics for adultery cases. Cheating spouses leave digital footprints like muddy boots on white carpet. The metadata told a story Lumi hadn't intended to share. GPS coordinates, device synchronization logs, even the camera angle suggested intimate proximity. These weren't casual group photos where an ex-boyfriend happened to photobomb the frame. I opened my laptop and began downloading everything from our shared cloud storage, 12 years of marriage, documented in pixels and timestamps. The carving knife lay beside the turkey, waiting for tomorrow's ceremonial slicing, but I had different plans for carving now. My phone buzzed with a text from Hayes. "Looking forward to tomorrow, brother. Been too long since we've all been together." Brother. The word tasted like spoiled wine. I typed back, "Absolutely. Family is everything. Can't wait to catch up." The cranberry sauce gleamed in its bowl, perfect and untouched. Tomorrow's feast would be memorable, but not for the reasons our guests expected. I had 18 hours to prepare, and unlike the turkey, this wouldn't require any thawing. The guest bedroom felt like a crime scene as I watched Lumi arrange fresh flowers on the nightstand. White lilies, her favorite. She hummed while she worked, the same tune she'd hummed on our wedding day 7 years ago. "Hayes will be comfortable in here," she said, fluffing the pillows with unnecessary attention. "I want everything perfect for him." "For him specifically?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. She glanced up, and for just a moment something flickered across her face. Guilt? Fear? Then her practiced smile returned. "For all our guests, obviously. You know how important hospitality is to me." I knew a lot of things about my wife that she didn't realize, like how she touched her wedding ring when she lied, spinning it around her finger in tiny circles. She was doing it now. "Did I mention Hayes texted me?" I said casually. "He seems excited about tomorrow." The ring spinning stopped. "Oh? What did he say?" "Just how much he's looking forward to being with family again." Lumi's laugh sounded forced, like ice cracking under pressure. "That's sweet. He's always been sentimental about holidays." I nodded and headed downstairs to my office. The laptop screen glowed with folders full of evidence I'd been collecting for months. Not just from last weekend's trip, but going back years. Phone records, credit card statements, hotel reservations. The digital breadcrumbs of a relationship that supposedly ended before our marriage. The paper trail told a different story. Charges for romantic dinners on nights Lumi claimed to be working late. Hotel stays in cities where Hayes had construction projects. Text message logs that read more like love letters than casual friendship. But the most damning evidence sat in a manila folder on my desk. Medical records from 4 years ago, when Lumi suffered what she called a miscarriage. I'd obtained the pathology reports through channels I'd learned in the Army. The tissue samples had been preserved, and DNA testing revealed a truth that shattered everything I thought I knew about our marriage. Hayes Rellan was the father of the child Lumi lost. The postnuptial agreement lay beneath the medical records, signed by Lumi last anniversary when she'd been 3 glasses deep in champagne. She'd barely glanced at the documents, trusting her loving husband's explanation about protecting our assets. The fine print told a different story about asset division in cases of adultery. My phone rang. Gavin Varon, Lumi's father and Hayes' biggest client. "Brooks, good to hear from you yesterday." Gavin's voice boomed through the speaker. "I've been thinking about what you shared regarding Hayes' business practices." I'd planted seeds of doubt about Hayes' construction company during a casual conversation. Nothing dramatic, just concerns about quality control and timeline management. Gavin's development projects kept Hayes' business afloat. I hope I wasn't speaking out of turn, I said. Not at all. Due diligence is important in any partnership. I'll be reevaluating our contracts after the holidays. After I hung up, I opened the divorce papers I'd filed 3 days ago. The process server would deliver them Friday morning, but tomorrow's dinner would make them unnecessary. By the time the turkey was carved, everyone would understand exactly what kind of man Hayes Relin really was. The cranberry sauce had set perfectly in the refrigerator, its surface smooth as glass. Tomorrow, I'd serve it alongside a feast of truth that would leave our guests with indigestion for years to come. Thanksgiving morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes everything feel possible. I stood in the kitchen at 6 a.m., basting the turkey with methodical precision. Each movement deliberate, practiced, like preparing for a mission. Lumi appeared in her silk robe, hair perfectly arranged despite the early hour. "You're up early," she said, pouring coffee from the pot I'd already prepared. "Big day ahead. Want everything perfect." She smiled, the same radiant expression that had captivated me 7 years ago. "I love how seriously you take these family gatherings. Hayes always says you're the brother he never had." The basting brush paused in my hand. Funny, I was thinking the same thing about him. By noon, our house buzzed with activity. Lumi's parents arrived first, Gavin carrying wine and Marcia clutching her famous sweet potato casserole. My sister Jenna came next, armed with homemade rolls and a knowing look that told me she suspected something was brewing. Hayes arrived precisely at 1 o'clock, carrying flowers for Lumi and a bottle of expensive bourbon for me. He looked every inch the successful contractor in his pressed khakis and button-down shirt, clean-shaven, confident, comfortable in our home like he belonged here. "Brooks," he embraced me with the kind of backslapping enthusiasm reserved for old friends. "This smells incredible. You've outdone yourself." "Wait until you see the main course," I replied. Dinner conversation flowed like the wine Gavin had brought. Hayes regaled everyone with stories from his latest construction project, his voice animated and engaging. Lumi laughed at his jokes with the kind of genuine delight she rarely showed for mine anymore. I watched them across the table, cataloging every shared glance, every moment of recognition that passed between them. To everyone else, they looked like old friends catching up. To my trained eye, they looked like lovers performing for an audience. The turkey emerged from the oven, golden and perfect. I carried it to the dining room with ceremonial pride, setting it before my assembled guests like an offering. The carving knife gleamed under the chandelier light, its edge honed to surgical sharpness. "Before we begin," I said, reaching for my wine glass, "I'd like to make a toast." The conversation quieted. 6 faces turned toward me expectantly. Lumi smiled encouragingly, her wedding ring catching the light as she lifted her own glass. "To family," I began, my voice steady and clear. "To the bonds that tie us together through good times and bad. To trust, loyalty, and the courage to face difficult truths." "Hear, hear," Gavin murmured, raising his glass higher. I paused, letting the moment stretch like a bowstring. Hayes sat frozen, his wine glass halfway to his lips, as if some primitive instinct warned him of approaching danger. "And," I continued, my smile never wavering, "to the interesting photos I found on my wife's cloud storage, particularly the ones from last weekend's wine country trip." The silence that followed was absolute. Hayes's glass stopped moving entirely, suspended in midair like a freeze frame. Lumi's face drained of color, her mouth opening in a small, perfect circle of shock. "Brooks," she whispered, "what are you—" "The photos with timestamps from 2:47 a.m., I continued conversationally, as if discussing the weather. "Room 237 at the Napa Valley Resort. Fascinating metadata, really. GPS coordinates, device synchronization logs. Amazing what modern technology can tell us about people's whereabouts." Hayes set his glass down with trembling fingers. "I think there's been some misunderstanding." "Oh, I don't think so." I picked up the carving knife, testing its weight in my hand. "See, I used to investigate these kinds of misunderstandings for the Army. Digital forensics was my specialty, adultery cases specifically." Gavin's face had gone rigid. Marcia clutched her napkin like a lifeline. Jenna sat back in her chair, her expression a mixture of shock and admiration. "Brooks, please," Lumi's voice cracked. "Not here, not now." "When would be better?" I asked, beginning to carve the turkey with smooth, practiced strokes. "After you and Hayes finish planning your next romantic getaway? Or should I wait until after the baby you lost 4 years ago would have graduated high school?" Hayes pushed back from the table so violently his chair toppled backward. "I have to go." "But we haven't served the cranberry sauce yet." I called after him as he stumbled toward the front door. It pairs so well with humble pie. The front door slammed with enough force to rattle the windows. Lumi sat frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks, her hands shaking uncontrollably. I continued carving the turkey with surgical precision, each slice falling away clean and perfect. "Brooks," Gavin's voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to control. "What exactly are you alleging?" I set down the carving knife and reached into my jacket pocket, withdrawing a manila envelope. "Not alleging, Gavin. Documenting. Hotel records, credit card statements, phone logs, medical records. Hayes Relin has been having an affair with your daughter since before our wedding. The child she lost 4 years ago was his." Marcia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Gavin's face cycled through confusion, anger, and finally, cold calculation. "Lumi," he said quietly. "Is this true?" My wife's silence answered louder than words ever could. I resumed carving the turkey, the blade moving with mechanical efficiency. Anyone still hungry? I'd hate for all this preparation to go to waste. The aftermath of Thanksgiving dinner played out like a controlled demolition. Lumi's parents left without dessert, Gavin's face carved from granite, and Marcia clutching her purse like armor. My sister Jenna stayed long enough to help clear the table, her movements efficient and purposeful. "How long have you known?" she asked, scraping cranberry sauce into the garbage disposal. "Months, maybe longer, subconsciously." I loaded wine glasses into the dishwasher with mechanical precision. The signs were always there. Late nights, mysterious phone calls, changes in routine. I just needed proof. And now you have it. Now I have everything. Lumi had retreated to our bedroom after her parents' departure, claiming a headache. I could hear her moving around upstairs, probably packing. She always was efficient when cornered. My phone buzzed with a text from Hayes. "We need to talk," I typed back. "I think we've said enough for one day." "This isn't over." "You're right. It's just beginning." Friday morning arrived gray and cold. Lumi emerged from the bedroom carrying a suitcase, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. She'd aged a decade overnight. "I'm staying at my sister's for a few days," she said, not meeting my eyes. "We need space to figure this out." "Nothing to figure out. I filed divorce papers Tuesday. You'll be served this morning." The suitcase slipped from her fingers, hitting the hardwood floor with a dull thud. "Tuesday? But Thanksgiving was Thursday." "Yes, I'm aware. I wanted to give you one last family dinner before everything changed." She sank onto the couch, her composure finally cracking completely. "Brooks, please. We can work through this. Counseling, therapy, whatever you want." I sat across from her, maintaining the distance I'd been building for months. "Remember the post-nuptial agreement you signed last anniversary? The one you barely read because you trusted me?" Her face went pale. "What about it?" "Section 12, subsection C. In cases of proven adultery, the unfaithful spouse forfeits all claims to marital assets. House, savings, investments, everything. That's not possible. No lawyer would..." "Would what? Protect a faithful spouse from financial ruin? Actually, most lawyers recommend exactly these kinds of protections." I leaned forward slightly. "Especially when the faithful spouse happens to be a former Army investigator who knows how to document evidence properly." The doorbell rang. Lumi flinched like she'd been struck. "That'll be the process server," I said, standing. "Right on time." I opened the door to a young woman in a business suit carrying a manila envelope. "Mrs. Lumi Carvin?" "That's her," I said, pointing toward the living room. Lumi accepted the papers with trembling hands, her face cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally resignation. The process server departed efficiently, leaving us alone with the wreckage of our marriage. 7 years, Lumi whispered. 7 years of marriage, and you're throwing it away over... Over what? An affair that started before our wedding? A pregnancy that wasn't mine? Years of lies, deception, and betrayal? I shook my head. "I'm not throwing anything away. You already did that." My phone rang. Gavin Varen's name appeared on the screen. "Brooks, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about Hayes' business practices." "Yes? I'm terminating all contracts with Relin Construction, effective immediately. I wanted you to know before I make the announcement." I glanced at Lumi, who was reading through the divorce papers with growing horror. "I appreciate the call, Gavin. Family loyalty works both ways. Hayes chose his side, and I'm choosing mine." After hanging up, I turned back to my soon-to-be ex-wife. "Hayes just lost his biggest client. Gavin's pulling all the contracts." "You planned this," she said, her voice barely audible. "All of it. The dinner, the timing, everything." I plan to protect myself from the consequences of your choices. There's a difference. She stood slowly, gathering her suitcase and purse. Where am I supposed to go? My accounts are frozen pending the divorce proceedings. Standard procedure in adultery cases. I handed her a storage unit key. Your personal belongings are in Unit 47 on Maple Street. I had them moved yesterday. The key felt heavy in her palm, like an anchor dragging her down. This is cruel, Brooks. Even for you. Cruel would have been letting this continue for another 7 years. This is just efficient. After she left, I sat in the silence of our empty house, surrounded by the remnants of Thanksgiving dinner. The cranberry sauce had congealed in its serving bowl, its surface no longer smooth but cracked and broken. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Marcy Rellan, Hayes' wife. We need to talk. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, I'll be right over. Marcy Rellan answered her door before I could knock, as if she'd been watching from the window. Hayes' wife was a small woman with sharp eyes and prematurely gray hair that spoke of years managing other people's messes. Come in, she said curtly. Coffee? Please? Her kitchen was spotless in the way that suggested nervous energy channeled into cleaning. She poured 2 cups with steady hands, but I noticed the slight tremor when she set mine on the table. Hayes didn't come home last night, she said without preamble. First time in 15 years of marriage. I sipped the coffee. It was excellent, probably expensive. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Her laugh held no humor. Because I'm not. I've been waiting for this shoe to drop for years. She disappeared into another room and returned with a manila envelope identical to the one I'd given Gavin. I received this yesterday morning. Fascinating reading. The envelope contained copies of everything I'd compiled on Hayes and Lumi. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, phone records, photographs. Months of evidence laid out in chronological order like a timeline of betrayal. You're very thorough, she said. Professional, even. Old habits. Army? The Criminal Investigation Division? Digital Forensics? She nodded as if this confirmed something she'd already suspected. I wondered how you'd managed to document everything so precisely. Most betrayed spouses just have suspicions and hurt feelings. Most betrayed spouses aren't trained investigators. Marcy refilled our coffee cups, her movements precise and controlled. I've known about the affairs for years. Plural. Lumi wasn't the first, and she probably wouldn't have been the last. This surprised me. You knew? I'm not blind, Mr. Carvin. Late nights, mysterious phone calls, charges on credit cards for places he claimed never to have been. The signs were obvious to anyone paying attention. Why didn't you leave? She gestured around the immaculate kitchen, toward family photos covering the refrigerator. 2 kids in private school, a mortgage on a house I love, a social circle that would evaporate if I became the divorced woman who couldn't keep her husband satisfied. Her smile was bitter. Easier to pretend ignorance and maintain the status quo. And now? Now you've made pretending impossible. Hayes lost the Varon contracts this morning. Gavin called personally to explain why. She pulled out her phone and showed me a text message. Hayes is panicking. He wants to meet tonight to work things out. The message was desperate, pleading. A man watching his carefully constructed world collapse in real time. What will you tell him? That I want a divorce. That I've already spoken to a lawyer. That I'm keeping the house, the kids, and half of whatever assets he hasn't already spent on his girlfriends. She set down her coffee cup with finality. What I should have said years ago. I studied her face, seeing strength I hadn't expected. You're not what I anticipated. What did you anticipate? Another victim. Someone who needed protection or sympathy. I stopped being a victim the moment I chose to stay informed rather than stay ignorant. I've been preparing for this day for years, just waiting for the right moment. She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. You provided that moment. My phone buzzed with a text from Lumi. Please call me. We need to talk. I showed the message to Marcy, who read it with interest. Desperation, she diagnosed. The reality is setting in. No money, no home, no support system. Hayes is probably in the same state. Good. You're not concerned about revenge? Hayes can be volatile when cornered. I thought about this seriously. Hayes was bigger than me, younger, and currently had nothing left to lose. But I'd faced dangerous men before, and Hayes struck me as the type who folded under real pressure. Let him come. I'm prepared. Marcy walked me to the door, her demeanor businesslike despite the personal nature of our conversation. Thank you for the evidence. It makes the divorce proceedings much simpler. Thank you for the warning about Hayes. One more thing, she said as I reached my car. Lumi called here this morning, looking for him. She sounded desperate. I think she's realizing that destroying your marriage doesn't automatically mean Hayes will leave his. I drove home through the gray afternoon, processing this information. Lumi and Hayes had blown up 2 marriages for an affair that might not survive the aftermath. The irony was almost poetic. My house felt different when I returned. Emptier, but also cleaner somehow. I'd removed the last traces of Lumi's presence while she was at her sister's, boxing up photographs and personal items with the same methodical approach I'd used to document her betrayal. The cranberry sauce still sat in the refrigerator, untouched since Thursday's disaster. I threw it away, bowl and all. Some things were too contaminated to salvage. Saturday night arrived with a winter storm that rattled windows and sent tree branches scraping against the house like fingernails on glass. I was reading in my study when the doorbell rang at nearly 10 o'clock. Hayes stood on my doorstep, soaked from the rain and wild-eyed with desperation. His usual polished appearance had deteriorated into something feral. Unshaven, wrinkled clothes, the smell of whiskey rolling off him in waves. "We need to talk," he said, pushing past me into the house before I could respond. I closed the door calmly and followed him into the living room. "Make yourself comfortable." He spun around, his movements unsteady but aggressive. "You destroyed everything. My marriage, my business, my reputation. For what? Because you couldn't handle sharing?" "Sharing?" I kept my voice level, non-threatening. "Is that what you call it when you sleep with another man's wife? Lumi and I have history. We were together first, before you even existed in her life. Then why didn't you marry her?" The question hit him like a physical blow. His mouth opened and closed without sound, searching for an answer that didn't exist. "You didn't marry her because you wanted the excitement without the responsibility, the affair without the commitment. You kept your comfortable marriage while stealing pieces of mine. That's not, isn't it?" I moved closer, and Hayes instinctively stepped back. "You had your cake and ate it too, until I served you the bill." He lunged forward suddenly, his hands reaching for my throat. But desperation makes men clumsy, and I'd been expecting this moment since Thursday. I sidestepped his charge easily, letting his momentum carry him past me into the coffee table. Hayes crashed into the furniture with a sound like breaking kindling. He rolled over, clutching his ribs, his face contorted with pain and rage. "You think you're so smart," he gasped. "So superior. But you're just a bitter man who couldn't keep his wife satisfied." I walked to my desk and opened the bottom drawer, removing a manila envelope thick with documents. "You're right about one thing. I am smart. Smart enough to know that the child Lumi lost 4 years ago was yours." The color drained from his face. "What?" "DNA testing on preserved tissue samples. Medical records don't lie, Hayes. Neither do paternity tests." He struggled to his feet, his earlier aggression replaced by something approaching terror. "That's impossible. She said what? That it was mine? That you didn't need to worry about it?" I opened the envelope and withdrew a lab report. 99.7% probability of paternity. Congratulations, you would have been a father. Hayes stared at the document like it might burst into flames. "She never told me." "Because she knew you'd run, just like you're going to run now." "I loved her," he said quietly, the fight draining out of him. "I really did." "No, you didn't. You loved the idea of her, the fantasy, the excitement of something forbidden." I returned the papers to their envelope. "Love requires sacrifice, commitment, choosing someone's well-being over your own comfort. You never did that." He looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time, taking in the family photos I'd already removed, the empty spaces where Lumi's belongings used to sit. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you live with the consequences. Marcy is filing for divorce. Gavin pulled your contracts. Your reputation in this town is finished. And Lumi..." I paused, letting the moment stretch. "Lumi is discovering that the man she sacrificed her marriage for isn't willing to sacrifice his comfort for her. She's staying with me, at my apartment. For now, until the money runs out and the reality sets in. How long do you think your great love will last when you're both broke and unemployable?" Hayes moved toward the door like a man walking through quicksand. At the threshold, he turned back. "I hope you're satisfied." "I'm not satisfied. I'm just finished." After he left, I poured myself a glass of bourbon and sat in the silence of my empty house. The storm continued outside, but inside everything felt still and settled. My phone buzzed with a text from Lumi. "Hayes told me about the baby. We need to talk." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some conversations were 4 years too late. The bourbon tasted like victory and loss in equal measure. I'd won the war, but the battlefield was littered with the wreckage of everything I'd once held dear. Outside, the storm raged on, washing the world clean for whatever came next. Sunday morning dawned clear and cold, the storm having passed through like a cleansing fire. I was drinking coffee and reading the newspaper when my doorbell rang again. Through the window, I could see Lumi standing on my doorstep, looking smaller somehow than she had just days before. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. 5 minutes, she said. Please. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. She entered the house she'd called home for 7 years like a stranger visiting a museum, her eyes taking in all the spaces where her presence had been erased. You removed everything, she said quietly. I removed the lies. Everything else was already gone. She sat on the edge of the couch, her posture rigid with controlled emotion. Hayes told me about the paternity test. I figured he would. Why didn't you confront me when it happened? 4 years ago, when I lost the baby. I considered the question seriously. Because I loved you. Because I thought maybe it was a mistake, a moment of weakness that you'd learned from. Because I wanted to believe our marriage was worth saving. And now? Now I know it was never really our marriage. It was just me, married to an illusion. She flinched as if I'd struck her. I did love you, Brooks. I still do. No, you don't. You love the security I provided. The stability, the respectability, the comfortable life. But you never loved me enough to choose me over him. Lumi's composure finally cracked, tears streaming down her cheeks. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Hayes and we were supposed to be over. Ancient history. But when we saw each other again at your company party 3 years ago... 3 years? The timeline clicked into place with sickening clarity. The baby was conceived 3 years ago, not 4. Her silence confirmed what I'd already begun to suspect. You've been lying about the timeline from the beginning. The affair never stopped, did it? It did, for a while. After we got married, I tried to make it work with you. I really did. But Hayes... She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. He has this way of making me feel alive. And I made you feel what? Safe? Bored? Convenient? Guilty, she whispered. You made me feel guilty for wanting something you couldn't give me. The honesty was brutal in its simplicity. I'd been married to a woman who resented me for being exactly who she'd chosen to marry. What do you want from me now, Lumi? Forgiveness, understanding, permission to rewrite history. I want you to stop this. Call off the divorce. Let me come home. We can work through this. Why? So you can continue the affair more carefully? So you can have your security and your excitement both? Because Hayes doesn't want me. The words exploded out of her like a confession under torture. He's staying with Marcy. He says he needs time to think, but I know what that means. He's choosing his comfortable life over me, just like he always has. There it was, the real reason for her visit. Not love, not remorse, not even guilt. Just the practical realization that she'd gambled everything on a man who wouldn't gamble anything on her. So, I'm the consolation prize? You're my husband. Not anymore. The papers are filed, the assets are divided, the truth is public. We're finished. She stood abruptly, her desperation transforming into anger. You're enjoying this. Watching me beg, watching everything fall apart. This is revenge, pure and simple. You're right. It is revenge. But not the kind you think. I walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where we'd planned to grow old together. This isn't about hurting you, Lumi. It's about refusing to be hurt anymore. What's the difference? The difference is that I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm just done trying to save you. She gathered her purse and coat with sharp, angry movements. Hayes was right about you. You're cold, calculating. You never really loved me either. Maybe not. Maybe I loved who I thought you were, just like you loved who you thought he was. The difference is I'm willing to face the truth. At the door, she turned back one final time. I hope you're happy, Brooks. I hope this emptiness you've created is worth more than what we had. What we had was already empty. I just stopped pretending otherwise. After she left, I sat in the silence of my house, feeling the weight of finality settle around me like dust. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. Dad wants to know if you're coming to Christmas dinner. I typed back, wouldn't miss it. Outside, the neighborhood was waking up to a normal Sunday morning. Families heading to church, children playing in yards, couples walking dogs and discussing weekend plans. Life continuing in all its messy, complicated, genuine glory. I had work to do. A house to reorganize, a life to rebuild, a future to imagine without the comfortable lies I'd been living with for years. The carving knife still sat in the kitchen drawer, cleaned and sharp and ready for whatever needed cutting. Some things, once carved away, never grow back. And sometimes that's exactly what healing looks like. The cranberry sauce bowl sat empty in the dishwasher, waiting to be filled with something new.